Okay, attendees will start showing up. We're at 10 or 11 now. Thanks for joining us, attendees. We're going to wait just about another minute or so while the rest of people have a chance to log on, and then we will get started. Thanks for joining us. And attendees will not be allowed to speak until called upon. So, and that will not happen until we're done with our presentation. So if you got your hand up, we'll come back to it. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the question and answer area of the presentation. I think that we've got 25 attendees on now. I think it's probably okay to go ahead and get started. So with that, my name is Matt Lafferty, Principal Planner with Larimer County Community Development. I'm Long Range Planner here. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Larimer County Oil and Gas Regulations, the next part of our code amendments, which has a lot to do with fees and other entitlements and whatnot. And we will be having a presentation on that. But before we do so, we're going to just take a brief moment and introduce who the rest of the panelists are. And then I'll turn it over to Leslie Ellis, who will start our meeting. So Lori Cadrich, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Matt. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lori Cadrich, and I'm the Director for Community Planning and Infrastructure Resources. And I work with Matt and Leslie on this project.
Thank you, Lori. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Frank Haug from the County Attorney's Office, and I work alongside the Community Development staff and Mr. Sura on the oil and gas regulations.
Good, thank you, Frank. Leah Schneider.
Hi, I'm Leah Schneider. I'm the Environmental Health Planner for the Health Department, participating with Leslie and Matt and the oil and gas team.
Thank you. And Matt Sura.
Matt Sura, Special Counsel to Larimer County, working with all these fine people on the oil and gas team on behalf of Larimer County.
Thank you, sir. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Ellis and let her do her introduction and then start the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Good evening, everybody. I'm Leslie Ellis. I'm the Community Development Director, also part of the team here. And my introduction is very brief, just to remind everybody where we've been, which is this is our third public meeting, and we've had a number of conversations with the Board of County Commissioners and work sessions and meetings with the public. And so we are meeting this evening to cover the topics that you'll hear from Matt Sura here momentarily. Next week on Monday, we have an afternoon and an evening work session with the Board of County Commissioners at 1:30 and 6:30. And then following that, we will be working toward preparing draft regulations, presuming that we are able to get through the content on the evening of the 24th and hear directions for that. And then we'll have another public meeting on June 3rd and moving toward having some later work sessions, as you see the dates here in July, with adoption anticipated at the hearings in July. So that is our schedule for now, always potentially subject to change, but we've been moving along on the schedule so far and hope to continue on with this schedule. And I think that's it for me, Matt Sura, so I'll turn it back over to you to carry on with your part of the presentation.
Thanks, Leslie. So tonight, it's going to be a very brief discussion. The changes that were put before you are less extensive than they have been in the past two meetings. we just went through the schedule for code amendment. I want to talk about the general approach for regulations, kind of remind folks of how we're working our way through this, and then getting into the compliance and fees section, talking about fees, inspections, financial assurance, insurance, and other topics. The approach that we've been taking is the avoid, minimize, and mitigate. The idea that we avoid impacts to public health, safety, and welfare through land use, both with the alternative location analysis, potentially zoning, potentially setbacks. All of those are on the table and have been evaluated, and we're still working through those. And there's minimizing by using of best management practices, some of the better standards that are out there to protect public health, safety, welfare, and the environment and wildlife resources, including protections for air quality, water quality, and the like. And then getting into mitigations, really looking at monitoring and enforcement and how we pay for that to ensure that it happens without any expense by Larimer County taxpayers. So to start off, really looking at the protecting public health, safety, welfare, and the environment. And a lot of folks have been asking for this to be discussed earlier in the process, but really looking at the overview of what is encompassed in the code amendments. We wanted to have the opportunity to reflect on that after we've already amended those codes and look at the intent and purpose at that time. So it is covered in this last round of review and changes. Intent and purpose sections state as plainly as we could that the intent and purpose of these sections are to protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. In the financial assurances section, which is 11.3.26, we're looking at financial assurance of bonding of $90,000 a well. This $90,000 figure comes from a number of sources, primarily the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission. In 2017, the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission announced that they had looked at the number of wells that they had plugged, abandoned, and reclaimed on their orphan well program and determined that over the last 5 years, there was an average expense of $82,500 per well. That was in 2017. Costs have only gone up. We felt that the rate of inflation and those costs allowed for it to be rounded up to $90,000 a well. We're only looking at allowing for surety bonds or irrevocable standby letter of credit. Those are easily accessible if they are necessary. The reason that they'd be necessary is if there was an operator that walked away from its requirements to plug and abandon a well after it's no longer used and useful. And so we would use that, or the county would use that to secure, plug, and abandon and reclaim a well site, as well as the well. It also could be used, it could be reduced or waived if the state or federal bonding requirements meet those obligations. That is, if the state requirements, which right now are insufficient to plug and abandon a well, if those were changed, if federal bonding levels were enhanced and increased, there's a possibility that we wouldn't want to double bond. The county bond could be replaced or it could be reduced in light of the higher bond at either the state or federal level. Looking at insurance requirements, there's general areas. I'm not going to go through these really busy slides, but we're looking at kind of general liability insurance, automobile, workers' compensation, control of well, and that's extra insurance just for a blowout, which can be very expensive. Looking at umbrella or excess liability insurance of $25 million, and then environmental pollution liability insurance, which is looking at $5 million, and that also requires them to look at gradual pollution events. That is, if there was a well site that had, say, a leaky tank battery or a leaky pipeline that was producing pollution over time, that environmental liability insurance would cover that event and the cleanup costs. In 11.5, we're looking at enforcement and inspections. Wanted to make it very clear that both new and existing wells may be inspected, that the county can inspect without an operator present. And this is different than what is stated in other parts of the code, specifically Article 1.9. We wanted to make sure that these facilities are far different than most facilities, most businesses, where you would want to have the owner present. These are typically run without anybody present at all. These facilities are left without any personnel at those facilities, and therefore, if there needs to be an inspection or if there's a complaint that needs a quick response, we want to make sure that the county inspector has the ability to get out there as soon as he or she is able. The county will attempt to give the operator notice. We're looking at a minimum 4 hours, but again, that's if it's feasible or possible. Looking at technical expert review, this is already in existing language that the county is not going to be burdened with those costs, that those are going to be costs that if there's an application that comes in or any review for any event, that's something that can be paid and will be paid by the operator themselves. And finally, looking at fees, there's currently in the code capital transportation impact fee that is expected to be paid by the applicant. We have added to that the requirement for paying of inspection fees, which is the full cost of those inspections, regardless of how many inspections are necessary by the operator. And at that, I will turn it over to public comment.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt, for that presentation. It was brief tonight because we've managed to get through a lot of topics on the previous 2 meetings. And so just like our previous meetings, what we're going to ask you to do, if you wish to speak and provide public comment, hit the raise your hand button on the lower part of your screen. That will put you in an order on the screen, and we will give each person a total of 3 minutes to speak each. We don't allow you to go back and speak a second time, so you get 1 chance at this. So cover your topics as you want to, what's important to you. I'll read off the names 1 or 2 ahead of line so that you can be prepared to talk when your name comes up. So with that, thanks everybody for listening in. I'm going to start and I'm going to allow to talk. It looks like Scott Koski, followed by Yi Hun Yang. Scott, you're free to unmute yourself and speak.
Can you hear me at this point?
Yes, sir.
My name is Scott Koski. I'm a native of Colorado and was raised and grown up in southwestern Colorado, came back to the northern Colorado area in 1988 and have resided here since that point in time. I have personal experience in dealing with the oil and gas operation, as some of those drilling expeditions took place on my family's farm in southwestern Colorado. But before I begin some of my instances, I'd like to note that some of the proposals and some of the things that have happened over time have had great economic impact overall, and I'd like to bring you that from a personal perspective. I must remind the county commissioners and any employees and any assistance or outside assistance that the county receives comes from taxes that I pay from the income that I receive. Prior to November of 2019, when Governor Polis was elected, I have a gravel pit on my farm out near Colorado. That gravel pit is rented and leased by Weld County. I was receiving somewhere on the order of about $8,000 to $10,000 per month as the oil and gas industry was booming quite well. Once Governor Polis was elected and then vowed to revoke Proposition 112 and began discussions to get Senate Bill 118 passed, things began to change. Within a week of that conversation happening in November of 2019, my son-in-law lost his welding job. His company that was supporting the oil and gas industry shut down. A week after that, his brother lost that job. Shortly thereafter, starting in December, all of a sudden my income off that gravel pit dwindled to less than $2,000 a month at this point in time. Also, I've had two neighbors directly impacted by the decisions made against the oil and gas industry. One particular neighbor served two terms over in Iraq with the U.S. Army. He worked for Anadarko for 20 years. He could see the writing on the wall and immediately began to reverse his position, stay in Colorado and look for a way to get out. He has since, as of February of 2020, moved back to his state of Texas, where he was able to get a job and be able to be employed. My second neighbor,
30 seconds.
As of March 2020, also did the same. I must let you know that those two particular instances, those incomes from those two families was well into the six-figure income. My son-in-law and his family have picked up and moved to Texas as well because they are not able to find local comparable welders work within the oil and gas industry. I would plead.
Please wrap up your comments.
I would plead with the commissioners, please review and be very, very careful and understand that the decisions you make can severely impact your economy and your local county, as well as making the decisions whether residents stay or leave. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right. Yehu Yang, Walt Warren, and then Bill Tregnick. Yi, you are allowed to speak now. I hope I did not brutalize that pronounce.
Yeah, actually, this is Richard Mulhern. Can I speak?
If that's, your hand, it comes up somebody else, but go ahead.
Okay, no problem. I just used the link that he gave me. My name is Richard Mulhern. I live at 131 Stanley Circle Drive in Estes Park, Colorado. And I own a business up here. We have 4 vacation rentals. And we've been doing these rentals for over 7 years in Estes Park and other places for many more years. We employ cleaners and maintenance people throughout. And my concern is the SB 181, which was passed in 2019, which, as you mentioned, created the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, focused very nicely on public rights while completely neglecting personal property rights. My concern is that any kind of restriction that you do above and beyond the state or above and beyond the Oil and Conservation Commission will create a liability for Larimer County residents. And this is due to the Supreme Court ruling of Nick versus Township of Scott in October 2018, which generally, basically, allows mineral right owners to recover property values of which they have been deprived. And this is due to the violation of the Fifth Amendment taking clause. In the Fifth Amendment, it says citizens will not be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process of the law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. When they overturned, basically what they did is they overturned Williams County versus Hamilton Bank, which required property owners to exhaust state court remedies before being able to file a federal taking clause claim. Chief Justice Roberts basically said the reason that he voted against it was because the likelihood that a plaintiff would bring a state court claim, lose, and therefore be precluded from bringing a claim to the federal courts at all. So basically, mineral rights owners may avert the state courts and go directly to the federal courts. My case is I own mineral rights, not in Larimer County, but in Weld County. I got them many years ago, maybe 15 years ago. I was offered for 17 acres, maybe $20,000 for my mineral rights. Well, for some reason, in the last several months, almost at least twice a month or maybe once a week, I've been getting calls to buy those mineral rights. And for those 17 acres, they're now offering me $87,000. Well, why would they be interested in that? That's what's compelling to me. We see the new Green Deal. We see oil leaving the state. Why are they interested? Well, I think that they're interested because they see an opportunity. If they were to buy my mineral rights, they have resources and an incentive to take this to the courts. I'm inclined to sell to them. I mean, I can't take this to the federal courts. I don't have the resources. If they take it to the courts, they would take the state of Colorado, and they would, if you put more restrictions, you would be listed in the lawsuit. And if you lose, if there is a lawsuit and you lose as a Larimer County resident, I lose. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I just want you to consider some of the other ramifications that may come if you pass any more restrictions on mineral rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next to speak will be Walt Warrens, followed by Bill Trednick, and then Deb Bjork. Walt, you're allowed to speak now. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity of letting me speak to you. As far as my background, my dad was a petroleum engineer, so I grew up around the industry. I worked as a geologist for about 4 years in the late 70s, early 80s, before getting laid off during a downturn, which is fairly common in that industry. Many of my friends are in the industry, so I've benefited from their perspectives. I also consider myself an environmentalist, and I worked locally with the Sustainable Living Association for a few years. I'm commenting in support of the oil and gas industry in Larimer County. I oppose further regulations on the industry and believe that Colorado has already got adequate regulations in place. We are currently seeing a rapid rise in the price of oil and gas, and placing more onerous regulations at this time would be irresponsible and short-sighted. The United States has benefited for decades from an industry that supplied fuel to our vehicles and factories and heated our homes. It did all this efficiently and at a low price. At the same time, it provided well-paying jobs for millions of Americans. The fracking technology developed in the last 3 decades has been a major driver in making the country energy independent. It has also reduced threats to our energy security from foreign powers. Technology will always be a two-edged sword, and it's true that the petroleum industry created serious pollution problems along with the benefits from fossil fuels. The oil industry has done much to clean up its act, and I feel government will always have a duty to impose proper regulations and, of course, police the industry, any industry. There will also be on the other hand, there will also be a lot of negative effects to any new energy sources, no matter how appealing and green they may seem. The manufacture of electric cars requires the mining of rare earth minerals and causes severe environmental damage in that process. Wind turbines, as we know, kill thousands of birds annually, and nuclear power has its own issues with waste disposal and inherent dangers. Contrary to some of the hyperbole that I've heard in a previous meeting, the drilling and fracking process is quite safe, and fracking has been done for over 70 years. Contamination of water supplies is actually quite rare, as is the threat, as one person put it, of earthquakes. Most freshwater aquifers are much shallower than petroleum reservoirs, the petroleum reservoirs that are the target of oil drilling. To sum up, much of our country's success is due to a strong oil and gas industry. It still has a major role in sustaining our economy.
30 seconds.
And I appreciate the chance to get to share my views with the committee, and gee, I guess that's good. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Okay, we have Bill Trednick, Deb Bjork, Bill Hawkins. Bill, you are now, Trednick, you're allowed to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
I'm a 27-year Army veteran who's lived out here in Colorado now for 15 years. And I just wanted to add my support to the oil and gas industry. I think we have enough regulations. We don't need to add anything more to what the state has provided for us. I have a son who is a marine engineer, naval architect, who has worked 20 years in the offshore oil industry out of Houston, Texas. And he has been laid off 3 times and has finally decided to quit the industry because of the regulations constantly changing what they're able to do offshore. And he has now given up that career and gone into something else. Again, I just want to provide support to the oil and gas industry here in Larimer County. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak my mind.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Deb York, Bill Hawkins, and then Andrew Norris. Deb, you're now allowed to speak.
Okay, thank you, Deb York. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. The revision of the intent, purpose, and applicability session now clearly prioritizes public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife, and I thank you for that. It resonates with the C change of SB 19181 and the mission change rulemaking. Overall, the addition of reclamation, inspections, financial insurance, assurance, and insurance requirements help ensure that Larimer County residents will be financially protected. Thank you. No blanket bonds, self-bonding, nor equipment liens are allowed. However, there are areas that need strengthening. Under financial assurance, please add fees. The county could charge a minimum $5,000 application fee for plus operator and inspection fees. And overall, $10,000 is likely the minimum amount to be collected by local governments to protect taxpayers from paying oil and gas industry costs, even if COGCC rulemaking creates financially protective regulations. The county should require annual proof of surety bond status and solvency of the insurer. As wells continue to get deeper, the cost of reclamation increases. The $90,000 per well surety bond is too low, as the average cost of reclamations can run higher according to several sources, including the Government Accountability Office, which quotes high cost wells on federal lands to be $145,000. The recent average cost wells in North Dakota was $180,000. 3 Pennsylvania wells cost an average of $233.3 thousand per well to plug and abandon. Until bonds are set at the actual cost of reclamation, regulators should set bond amounts that increased as reclamation costs increase and be reviewed annually. Insurance term, the required financial assurance bonds and insurance should be provided to the county prior to commencement of any work, including well pad construction, and remain in effect until reclamation is completed, or unless an evidence-based financial table can be devised to quantify how or whether amounts can be reduced based on the purpose for what it was provided. It is of note that the section on insurance coverage is very similar to other local government recent regulation revisions, with notable exceptions in the Larimer County draft, which significantly weakens insurance protections in some areas. Larimer County draft reduced the coverage for the control of well and impacts on residents and environmental liability, polluters liability from 25 million each to 10 million. In addition, this draft leaves out legal response liability insurance for pollution related bodily injury or property damage.
30 seconds.
Okay, and extending protection liability insurance coverage to county elected officials and appointed officials. In addition, adequate insurance of its contractors and subcontractors, and an operator agreement covering responsibility for any damage or loss suffered by the county as a result of negligence from either the operator or contractors or subcontractors. And one final thing, add a penalty and enforcement section. Without specifics of how regulations will be enforced and what the penalties will be, financially unstable companies may be tempted to skirt financial and insurance requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Okay. Bill Hawkins, you're allowed to speak. Andrew Norris on deck, and then Karen Artell.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. This is Bill Hawkins. I've been in the oil and gas business in the Denver-Julesburg area off and on for over 40 years. I've raised 3 daughters here, 2 of which attended CSU and 1 went to Mesa State. But I also have 2 son-in-laws. Pardon?
Can you speak into your mic a little better? It's kind of faint.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes,
I
sir.
just need to speak louder. Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, I have 3 daughters, been here for over 40 years. I have 2 son-in-laws involved in the oil and gas business because they saw it as a good way to make a living. They passed Proposition 112 or defeated it by 58%, and the government decided that they'd go to be more stringent. Without the oil and gas business, you're losing your taxes. Where Colorado has come from has improved greatly, believe me, in the 40 years that I've been out here compared to what they used to do. It's much better. Is there room for improvement? Of course there is. There's always room for improvement. I just wanted to say that it's been a good living for me, and I thought it going to be a good living for my family. To take that away, I don't know what you're going to replace it with. These are well-paying jobs, and having them go out and work in the restaurant business is not going to make up for the high cost of living in Colorado. Thank you for your time, and I just wanted to say that living out here has always been a privilege, and I've enjoyed everything, and just hate to see it so restricted that for those of us who work with our hands versus those in the service industry. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Andrew Norris, Karen Artell, Alita Villatro. Andrew, you're allowed to speak now.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. I'm here to speak to you tonight about my thoughts regarding the proposed tightening of regulations in the oil and gas exploration industry. I think you'd both agree that the oil and gas industry has been recognized as a vital part of the US, Colorado, and especially Larimer County's economy. The number of oil and gas rigs have significantly dropped in the state, somewhat due to COVID, but a lot of it's due to increased regulations. The environmental, OSHA, and permitting requirements in Colorado are already difficult or oppressive, depending upon how you see it. Due to less oil and gas industry jobs, the number of employed individuals in the industry has already dropped significantly. With this comes the loss of business that this segment of population produced. Housing, food, entertainment, bars, retail stores, doctor's office visits have decreased in Larimer County as a result of loss of business from these people having to leave their jobs. So you're thinking of making the rules tighter and stricter, and that will fix the problem. Close up the industry, many say. However, business will go away, and with high unemployment already in Colorado and Larimer County, we really can't afford that at this time. You can't cause an industry to dry up and not expect an economic impact on the residents in Larimer County. Decreased business means decreased tax-based revenues coming in, and either less spending and services or higher taxes for the remaining residents, or worse yet, both. We've already seen a significant rise in the cost of gasoline at the pump. Reminding you all, it's been a year since we saw $1.87 for gas. Cutting fuel exploration will further increase the price of gasoline, diesel, and heating fuel. Finally, to give you some background, I don't work for the oil and gas industry. I'm a physician. This is particularly personal to me because with these changes and many other decisions that are occurring in Larimer County and the state of Colorado, my wife and I have made the difficult decision after 35 years to leave the state. Business conditions are changing here, and I might say in my retirement that my observation of the changes and comparison over the last 35 years of my practice that we have called this home are not for the good. So respectfully, I ask our county commissioners that you tread lightly on the feet of this and other businesses. Please give them the latitude to do the business they've been doing in Colorado for over 75 years and in Larimer County and keep our economy strong. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Karen Artel, Alita Villatoro, and then Ed Bien. Karen, you can unmute now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Karen Artel. I live in Larimer County. I want to thank the county commissioners, county staff members, Mr. Sura, and community members for all your efforts to bring the county's oil and gas regulations up to compliance with Senate Bill 181. Thank you for the edits to the intent and purpose sections of the regulations to be in line with Senate Bill 181 for both new and existing oil and gas facilities and to protect public health, safety, general welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. I agree with the addition of the interim reclamation to section 11.322 and for the operator to submit an interim reclamation plan. Thank you for the greatly expanded financial assurance section. Also that both new and existing oil and gas facilities must demonstrate compliance with all relevant sections of the regulations and the enforcement and inspection section. It's important for the county to reserve the right to inspect oil and gas facilities at any time and as necessary. I want to add that the county should look at regulating oil and gas geophysical exploration or seismic testing. You can look at the Boulder County regulations as a resource for those regulations. So thanks again, and that's it.
Thank you so much. Okay, now looks like Alita Villatoro, Ed Behan, and then Yi-Hoon Yang again, whoever the new one is.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Hi, thanks. I'm Alida. So first off, I want to say I'm very happy to see that you guys are requiring insurance. Really the presentation sounded mostly good to me in this area. I would just hope that you would adjust the $90,000 bond for inflation so that you guys don't have to come back and make a change later to that. And also, I think Deb was talking about the liability insurance being 10 million for environmental damage or damage to residents, and I would support that being raised to 25 million. My general philosophy on regulating industry that can potentially pollute is that the fees need, for not following regulations need to be high enough to deter rule breaking. It can't be cheaper to break the rules than following them. There can't be a incentive basically for corporations to break the rules because the fees are a slap on the wrist. I did just want to address that someone mentioned that wind turbines kill birds, and that has recently been solved by painting dots on the blades. So that's been greatly reduced. And I believe that's it. Thank you so much for listening, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Okay, Ed Behan, Yi-Hoon Yang, and then Kate Christensen. Ed, you're allowed to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. Appreciate the chance to speak. I would also like to express my support for increased bonding requirements for the reclamation of a well at the end of its production service. I will put into the Q&A a couple of links that highlight the experience in North Dakota, which is arguably an oil-friendly state. And the experience that they have there on the average cost of shutting down a well, capping it, and doing the proper reclamation on the land, again, averaging in the neighborhood of about $180,000. So considerably more than the $90,000 bond presently you have on board here. I don't know perhaps the arcana involved with how you have to meld the coverages you require or the bonding that you require with what the state requires, but I'm aware that COGCC is in the process of viewing those levels. You may be facing the possibility of having to revise up anyway, one way or the other, based on, you know, how their process goes. So I just want to plant that seed. And I want to speak briefly to, in some sympathy to the folks who are expressing their concerns about the industry going away because they think it's going to be overregulated. And I don't doubt good people are working there trying to do the best that they possibly can. There's a lot of industries that have gone by the wayside as new technologies come online. And I think there's a lot of skill sets for people working in the oil and gas industry that could be applied to renewable energy industry as well. There was a particular piece I had read 3 months ago highlighting that, you know, the inside of a wind turbine, that's a bunch of mechanics in there. Somebody who's working on an oil and gas rig or working on pipelines, you know, they've got skill sets that can be applied to keeping the gears turning, keeping the machinery oiled, keeping that wind turbine moving smoothly. I'm sure there's other samples. The notion of some sort of transitional training for folks who are displaced as the technology changes, I think that's something we need to pay attention to. But doing nothing is not an option. Adequate regulation, we do need that. Thank you, and we appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Okay, and got Yihun Yang, Kate Christensen, and Susan Quinella. Yi, whoever that is. You're allowed to unmute. You need to unmute. All right. I ask one last time, Yi Hun Yang, whoever that might be.
I just unmuted.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you. Okay, third time. Janet Jewell is my name. I'm a longtime Larimer County resident, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak during the public comment tonight. These proposed rules and regulations would be an oil and gas, a ban on oil and gas development in Larimer County, and cutting jobs and our economic investment while Colorado businesses are right now trying to reopen and recover from this last year's pandemic. I wouldn't want to compound the problem by creating more of a hostile job environment that we have here in Larimer County trying to get jobs going. This whole effort, I feel, has been conducted without some proper considerations, especially in regards to what it will cost our schools from the public funding that oil and gas gives. That's been a very important thing for me to see that our schools are funded properly. It's also not a lot backed by science, some of these things that are being done. Oil and gas development is cleaner than ever and now provides so many jobs for Larimer County residents. We do have adequate rules and regulations in place, and I feel that I would like to urge the county commissioners to oppose these new rules and regulations and additional taxes that would be levied on these oil and gas industries. I don't think we can afford this action that you're proposing at this time. I do appreciate all the time and effort that all of your staff has put in on this, and the presentations you've given us have been very clear. But I also would like to urge that we would reconsider some of these things. And I'm also wondering where the commissioners are. I don't know that they're in attendance at our meeting tonight. And last week, only one was in attendance. Do they not care about our public comments and hearing what we have to say and feel that attending this meeting is important to them? So I just would like to offer that out as a concern that I have. And as a longtime resident, I do really love this county and I really do want to see the best for everyone. And that includes good jobs and a good oil and gas possibility, and for all companies to invest in Fort Collins, Larimer County, and forever. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just say real quick, our commissioners are very busy. Sometimes they're out of the office or out of town doing other matters around the county and whatnot. So we do record these items so that they can come back and watch them and be connected that way. I would also invite you to remember that next Monday at 1:30 and then again at 6:30, the commissioners will be discussing their position on some of these things after viewing all the materials. Hopefully they'll provide us some insight as to where they're going. So make sure you log on and watch those things as well. Kate Christensen, Susan Quinnell, I'm sorry, and Nadine Young are on deck. So allowed to talk is Kate Christensen.
Hi, thank you. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I was just planning on listening and learning. But like Ed said before, my heart is going out to all these people who are worried about losing their jobs. And I wanted to, if people weren't aware, I wanted to let them know that there's a just transition office at our state that includes coal workers, but not oil and gas workers. And I encourage everyone concerned about the welfare of the oil and gas workers to contact their local legislatures. We have over 100,000 wells that have been drilled over this across the state over the years, and they will all need to be plugged and abandoned. That is a great opportunity for jobs for oil and gas workers. We know that it's a dying industry. Companies continue to go bankrupt. The Houston Chronicle reported that 100 oil and gas companies went bankrupt this year. It's not SB 181 that's caused these difficulties and job loss. It's the industry as a whole. I wanted to also call attention to two relevant things that happened in the news today. One is that the International Energy Agency released its first ever, this is not like a super green organization, the International Energy Agency, its first ever scenario aligning with a commitment to limit global warming, not reduce, limit to 1.5 degrees Celsius. It's unprecedented. The new IEA scenario finds no need for investment in new fossil fuel supply. 70% of our oil and gas gets exported. And if the IEA is saying that, I don't know that oil and gas is going to continue to be a good investment. This means no new expansion of investment in oil, coal, or gas beyond what is already committed. Second, the Denver Post reported today a recent study that shows our state is on track to fall woefully short of meeting our goals for greenhouse gas emissions, only reducing our emissions from 2005 by 3.5% if we keep doing what we're doing. And we need to reduce it by 2030 by at least 50%. These are really good reminders that oil and gas wells release greenhouse gases, especially methane, CO2, and also VOCs. They don't just produce money. As far as the current regulations go with the financial assurances, I'd recommend adding a fines and penalties section for leaks and spills, explosions, all those things that can happen at oil and gas facilities. Because if that is going to happen, which inevitably there are accidents, we want to make sure that the oil and gas companies pay for it. Thanks for taking the time and the comments. I appreciate it.
We're going to have Susan Quinnell, Nadine Young, and then Steve Shagri. So Susan, you are now free to speak.
Thank you. I'm a resident of Larimer County, and I want to thank the people on the presentation today for all your work, the staff and the lawyers. It's just an incredible, it boggles my mind how much you've put into this so far. And as we're going towards our goal of better regulations. So thank you. As I understand it, I'm very happy about revising section 11.1, dealing with intent, purpose, and applicability, which makes the protection of Larimer County people's public health, safety, and welfare, as well as the environment and wildlife, the very first priority. To continue this theme in today's subject of financial assurance, please support the following. Fees, there should be at least a minimum of $5,000 for an application fee, plus operator and inspection fees. Annual proof of surety bond status. Operators should cover a surety bond tied to the actual cost of reclamation. And I would like to echo others who think that $90,000 is not going to cut it into the future, and would suggest a bond amount around 180,000. I'd like to comment that regulations are only as good as the penalties and enforcements that are included with them. So would like to see that fines and penalties be included and expanded upon. And I'll just say that the County of Boulder has a nice page that I hope the staff and the commissioners will review carefully. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Nadine Young, Steve Shagri, and Matt Blanco. Nadine, you're allowed to speak now.
Hi, can you hear me tonight?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, I would just like to say thank you for allowing us this time to give public comments regarding the oil and gas industry. As you well know, I am very much in favor of the industry itself. For those people who keep touting what Boulder is doing, we're not Boulder. We don't want to be Boulder. If we wanted to be Boulder, we would live in Boulder. I don't. I chose to live in Larimer County. I have done that for 15 years. Like most people that support this industry, I'm not opposed to alternative energy. I rode the bus to work today, but I realized that without oil and gas, I wouldn't have a bus to ride to work. What I feel that I need to do is to put a human face on the amazing men and women who work in this industry. Since I can't show you the pictures, I'm going to tell you a story. Tim and Pam met while they were working with the same company. He was the popular quarterback jock of high school. She was the cool chick. They moved in together and promptly got a dog that Tim would always say was, when we would go to visit, he would always say, I hate that dog. The dog adored him, and Tim would not relent to pet her, to love her, whatever. Careers took them in different places. She eventually moved to Arizona and took the dog with her. When Luna met an accident, an unfortunate demise, Tim drove all the way to Arizona to get her a puppy, a schnauzer. And I think if he had that puppy today, he would probably say the same thing. These are the people you're trying to vilify in this industry. These people are good, honest, hardworking, generous people. And nobody talks about them. We just think about all of the regulations and that they're going to lose their jobs. It's not it. They're people. They are people. And we need to keep that in mind. I gave you 2 challenges before. One, to name a product. And again, for everybody out there, name a product that doesn't have oil and gas in its supply chain. And you all know you can't do it. The second challenge I gave you was to give up the 10 everyday products deprived of petroleum. You can find alternatives to most of them. Aspirin, you could take Tylenol. CDs, you could stream video. Chewing gum, don't chew it. Rugs and clothing, only get natural fibers. Dentures, well, I don't know what you're going to do if you need that one. Lipstick, don't use it. Shampoo, make your own and put it in a glass bottle, not a plastic, because plastic comes from petroleum. Solar panels, well, I don't know how you're going to make solar panels without petroleum. In toothpaste, you could use baking soda. So here's my current challenge to everyone out there listening today.
30
I
seconds.
would like you to put in your mind for just the next 24 hours, everything that comes from oil and gas industry and how it got to the place it resides in your life. Your computer, your phone, your tires, the clothes on your back, your significant other. Really think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Shagri, Matthew Blanco, and then I've got one called Galaxy J7 Refined. So we'll see who that is. Nadine Young, please.
I just spoke, sir.
Okay. Steve Shagri, you're allowed to speak now.
Thank you, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to get right to it. First of all, I would like to discuss the health and safety concerns that many have expressed. And as such, I will refer everyone to the 2018 report released by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Safety, authored by Chief Medical Officer Dr. Larry Block, that unequivocally states that a 500-foot setback is more than sufficient and that no public action is recommended at this time. Furthermore, I would like to refer everyone to the report released by the United States Geological Survey and the Environmental Protection Agency that clearly states that when performed properly, hydraulic fracturing poses absolutely no threat to the water table, none whatsoever. Now I'm going to move on to rising fuel costs that will be a consequence of even further onerous and myopic regulations. We know that rising fuel costs disproportionately affect poor and middle-class families the most, and these people are already struggling. So I would hope that the commissioners would take that into consideration. Second, oil and gas industry contributes $1 billion in tax revenue every single year. 600 million of that goes towards education funding, and that 600 million makes up 75% of all dispersions from the school trust. So I'd like everyone to think about how we're going to make up for a shortfall of that size. Now I'd like to go on to jobs. Colorado is the fourth largest oil and gas producing state in this country, and as such employs 250,000 workers. Now, these are not low-paying jobs. These jobs pay on average of $90,000 to $100,000 a year. And that is a significant contribution to your tax base. And to lose it, you're going to have to make that money up somewhere. I would assume in rising property taxes and fees. In closing, I think it is ill-advised to strangle this industry even more, considering the fact that Colorado already has the strictest oil and gas regulations in the country. And I can say that as an industry expert who has worked in almost all of the 50 states.
30 seconds.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, a few people are asking that they're not coming up on the list. You're on the list, you're just down a ways. There's still quite a few people. So really quickly, the next up to speak, it will be Matt Blanco, followed by Galaxy J7, Rich Coolidge, Gayla Martinez, Dick and Louise, Yi Yun Yang, Megan Bright, Marie McCord, Peter Cunningham, Bill Park. So you're on the list. Please be patient. Matt, you're allowed to speak at this time.
Thank you, commissioners, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak my voice as a fourth generation native of Larimer County. That I say also as a worker in the oil and gas industry. I'm a radiographic technician. I am one of the many workers that inspect every well that goes into the ground and into production of oil and gas. I am one of many that love their jobs, go to work every day and enjoy what I do because of the people that I get to work with. I ask that you consider the impact not only on the local community by the loss of jobs, the rising cost of living, but also as the national economy. We all know how hard it hurts at the pump when we can't get gas. While yes, we do export oil, that also affects every person down to every penny. Most of which, most of the effects do trickle down to everybody in each and every way, to what you pay for heating your home. Good luck doing that with the solar power. Yes, you're going to get energy from the sun. You can open your windows and such, but however, you're going to get those solar panels without oil and natural gas. Secondly, also wind. It's a great source of energy as well, but not a reliable one. When you turn on your light switch, unless it's going to be a windy day and you're connected to that grid, you're not going to be able to get that power. Also, how are you going to manufacture those? Because I guarantee you those lights in those massive factories come from oil and gas produced here in Colorado. I would also like to say that the regulations in the oil and gas industry in Colorado, most of those companies meet and exceed those regulations already without even being asked. They're not afraid to regulate themselves. It creates a great balance between those who oppose and those who are with the oil and gas. Again, as a fourth generation Larimer County native, my mother taught in schools, and I guarantee she spent every dime she could to produce projects and supplies for her class. I know at least a third of her annual income, which I know most people know is not that much, went right back into her classroom. As a Blanco in this county, we have worked the fields and fed this community, and I would like to continue doing so with the regulations as they currently stand. I don't see any reason for any further regulation. Job placement would be awesome, but who's going to pay for that when I can't afford to feed my 2 children and my wife? Thank you very much, and I appreciate the moment to speak.
Thank you, sir. Galaxy J7, Rich Coolidge, Gayla Martinez. Galaxy J7, you're allowed to speak.
Yeah, can you hear me on this phone?
Yes, sir, I can.
Ron Herkstroder, I've lived here in Larimer County, Loveland, and Fort Collins since 1963. We, the state of Colorado voted this 181, I think it was Senate Bill 181, down a couple of years ago, and yet they still keep shoving it down our throats, forcing us to do that. And the people of Colorado are not liking it. We need this oil and gas industry. Everything we touch every day is either made from, with, transported by oil and gas. The windmills, they take like 45 to 80 gallons of oil just to lubricate these things. You guys can't keep regulating this out. The tax money that comes from that is astronomical, and we can't afford to lose that tax money. So please do not add more regulations on the oil industry. That's a great industry, and we need it here in Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, one other thing I want to say, you guys want us to be like Texas last spring without any power at all? That's in Colorado. We have a lot more worse weather than they have in Texas. And you guys keep relying on these windmills and solar panels. We're going to wind up here living in the Stone Ages. That's it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Rick Coolidge, you are now allowed to speak, followed by Gayla Martinez, and then Dick and Louise.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Rich Coolidge, and I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I wanted to echo and support many of the passionate energy workers and supporters engaged here tonight. Men and women professionals in this industry have led the technological improvements and developments here in Colorado that help us develop some of the cleanest oil and gas molecules in the world. I wanted to focus my comments tonight specifically on the financial assurance language and wanted to clarify some misperceptions. First, let's be very clear. The issue with orphaned wells addresses a very rare occurrence. The vast majority of operators are plugging and reclaiming more wells than they're drilling. Second, the $90,000 figure proposed by Mr. Sura is not tied to any data. It looks like it's simply greater than the COGCC's presumption of 82,500. But even the COGCC's number is high. In fact, according to the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, the average cost for the COGCC to plug and reclaim wells is less than $65,000, well below the $82,500. In short, the $90,000 is simply not defensible. To be clear, the state is currently looking at revising its own financial assurance rules this summer. So Larimer should withdraw this new language before it shoehorns this into its regulations and may have to change or alter those numbers. The state will hold a broad stakeholder process that will look at facts and figures instead of guesses. It will hear from all sides to craft a reasonable policy that balances the state's needs, the operators, and surrounding communities. If the county is determined to move forward on its own, it should at least take a closer look at the bonding amount. That $82,500 is a statewide average considered by the COGCC. Those costs look at different landscapes across the state and not just those found in Larimer County. So to identify a real number, we should look at specific plug and reclaim costs for operators and the type of wells they have in Larimer County. That's all the comments that I had, but I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Gayla Martinez, followed by Rich Coolidge, then Dick and Louise. Gayla?
Yes, thank you. This is Gayla Martinez, and I live in Fort Collins. My primary message tonight, as a week ago, is just to give my thanks to the staff, Matt Sura, the commissioners, all of those who've been working on these regulations. Each draft that comes out is better than the previous one, and just really appreciate the work you've put into this. I've heard many good comments tonight, and I'm not going to try and repeat those. So there's just one little thing I would like to bring up, and this actually is from section 11.34, leak detection and repair. What's written in there in the latest draft is a requirement for annual inspections. And then I notice also when a leak is detected, the operator has 72 hours in order to make the repairs. I think the 72 hours is fine, but there seems to be a disconnect here in the sense that if the inspections are only conducted once a year, you could have a leak that's been going on for months and months and months. And then once it's detected, we of course want to deal with it as quickly as possible. I believe, and I'm not absolutely sure on this, but in my research, I'm pretty sure that some of the other local governments have a requirement for monthly inspections every 30 days. And I would like to suggest that more frequent inspections be considered. That's all, and thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, Dick and Louise, Yihun Yang, Cheng, and Megan Bright. Dick or Louise?
Yeah, my name is Dick Link and my wife is Louise, and we have resided in Larimer County for 49 years and in Berthoud area for 31. And first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity for us to voice our concern regarding additional regulations. I think what we need to do is use some common sense, and sometimes that goes by the wayside. So that's what we're concerned about. Larimer County has been a long, thriving economic community, and it's economically strong. But our prosperity and future success are in jeopardy. And thanks to rules that they're talking about, that could cause problems there. Rules and regulations that largely stop any oil and gas development and hurts our business climate and jobs. And it's just important. The jobs are important, but just the situation it will create for people that live here now. A good example is we have some rental properties, and we have one that's powered by electricity, and the people constantly complain about their bill. So especially gas is very economical, and I'm not real sure why we want to try to put more regulations on that. So we would appreciate it if you really consider that and stop these job killing regulations. Colorado has some of the most stringent rules and regulations on oil and gas now. Why add to that? And the rules were just updated last year. So there's not really any need for put additional rules on it. Rules have killed this country and regulations have, and we just need to back off a little bit. And we need to get this county and this country back to work. And right now, that's not happening.
I'm Louise Link, and I agree with what my husband says. I think you need to let your current rules work through and see what happens, and then maybe address it at a later time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. One of the things I do appreciate is you listen to a lot of people, and you act concerned, and that's important to us. So thank you.
Thank you both, and we are. We believe everybody should have a good say in this, and we take your comments serious. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we now have Ji Hoon Chang again, whoever this one is. You'll announce it in a second. Then Megan Bright, and then Marie McCord. So Ji Hoon Chang, unmute yourself. Yes.
This is Gene Maycroft. I don't think it's my turn to talk, but I'm here. Just wanted to real quickly say that with the prices, let me back up a minute. I'm in the construction industry. I do a lot. I've been in the industry for over 50 years, and rental business for almost over 50 years as well. And we do a lot of masonry work, that kind of thing, but I do houses, restorations of old historic buildings, and homes. It's up for people. These are homes that people have to live in. At the prices are going up of building materials today. It's getting harder and harder for people, not only to buy a new house, but even more so to fix up the ones that they have. What concerns me is beyond my own personal interest is the fact that houses are going to be starting to falling apart. People are not going to be able to fix them. We're going to turn this country into a third world if we keep having all these regulations that we keep putting on. Most of these things are better handled in the private sector. And I'm just pleading with you guys to stop and think about this, because where we're heading is not a good place, and people are going to be hurt more so every day because of just a simple fact of cost of that, jobs being lost, people not be able to upgrade and even deal with maintaining their properties. All this kind of stuff is going to make us really big, as I said, to a third world country. So I'm not going to say any more, but please consider that, because there's many aspects, like somebody else has said, to the kind of problems that we're having to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Megan Bright, Marie McCord, and Phil Park. Megan, you're allowed to speak.
Hey there, I'm Megan Bright. I own a home here. I've been here 10 years. Compliance is kind of an interesting topic. I was at the USDA and found the federal sector to be somewhat insensitive when it came to compliance. As a technical writer, I brought up some points, and I actually lost my job over butting heads with someone to make some changes basically that were outside of the budget. So I just wanted to make it kind of clear that it is difficult sometimes when you see something out of compliance to speak up. But specifically as it relates to O&G, since I've lost my job, my brother, who owns a company in California, he and his wife work for Chevron. I'm actually helping him while he pays my mortgage, just to staff a few people. And I did hire a woman in their lab research building. And when they found out she was breastfeeding, she has to sign a waiver. And she's not even surrounded really by a lot of carcinogens, but it's just because it's in an oil and gas company and so forth. So that was kind of interesting. But more importantly, or not more importantly, but what I wanted to bring to your attention for Larimer County is because I'm now searching for a well site, and I know Mr. Blanco mentioned he was a certified well site expert. I'm looking for someone who has that international well control certification and is also a member of the International Association of Drilling Contractors. A lot of these folks are transients. They come in 14 days on, 14 days off. They make about $1,000 a day. But I would really stress to the commissioners and to the permitting officials that you please make sure that these folks do have the appropriate certification and training, well sharp, well cap. These are all certificates that they need to avoid having mishaps and mistakes. That way compliance doesn't have to be such a big topic, because you'll have experts that you know that are on site and are less likely to make mistakes. So that's really all I've got. Thank you.
Megan. Marie McCord, followed by Phil Park, Tim Gosar. Marie?
Good evening, and thank you. My name is Marie McCord. I am in the oil and gas industry, barely right now. I'm having trouble finding projects, but I have done this for about 30 years, and I'm a landman. I live in Larimer County. I've lived in Weld County for 12 years, 13 in Larimer County. We're taxpayers here. I worked a lot with the COGCC prior to drilling wells and making sure that we were in compliance with everything prior, even after we had a permit to drill. And when I started in the industry, well, mid-career somewhere, I did a lot of the same work. And it only took me, a month or so to get a well cleared for drilling. And then I moved to England for 4 years because I married a man from England. But when I came back to work, there were so many rules and regulations in effect that it would take 3, sometimes even a year and a half, 2 years to get a well cleared for drilling. So following the COGCC rules and regulations, they do a really good job. And I just, as a taxpayer here, I just can't see having to have all those regulations when the COGCC already has so many in place. I think that maybe we should put the pressure on them, and that's who you should be speaking to, instead of putting all of this onto the taxpayers and taking away from taxpayers too, because like the schools, I have so many friends always talking about our schools. We have to send this, we have to send this. You would have to send a box of Kleenex with your kid because the schools can't afford it. What happens when we take all this tax money away from them? I mean, that will get so much worse. There's so much money when you take away all that's going into our schools and other areas that we can't afford. We can't afford as taxpayers. And I understand the environmental part of it because I grew up in Southern Colorado, and my family has one of the largest oldest working ranches in the state. It's 6 generations now, and they're still running it. So I understand. I have such a passion for the land and the air, and I mean, that's my history. So in seeing what they're doing, oil and gas companies and the industry has come a long, long way in changing as time goes on. And I just think that a lot of people still have the idea that we're in the 80s and the 90s when there weren't these rules and regulations, but the COGCC does a great job. I don't think we need to have any more from Larimer County. And I wasn't planning to speak tonight, so I had nothing ready. I just got someone else's spot, but I thank you for giving me the time. And just, I mean, oil and gas, we are good people and we do provide a lot. I mean, there are restaurants that say, oh, yeah, we're going to have to close up because the oil and gas people. Okay, but I thank you for the time. Anyway, the oil and gas people aren't coming here anymore because they can't buy dinners and they can't do this. And I know it's COVID too, but this was happening before. But I thank you for your time and thank you.
Thank you. Phil Park, then Marie McCord, and then Tim, I'm sorry, then Tim Gosar, and then Peter Cunningham. Phil?
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. My wife moved here from Texas 6 years ago. And I bring this up because I work in a technology job, and the one thing about technology is that we figure out solutions. And I think that the energy industry as a whole will adapt as well. Whether the oil and gas industry and the oil and gas companies will adapt is questionable, but the energy industry will adapt. We will get industry. So the argument that additional safety regulations, stricter ones like 2,000-foot setback in Larimer County will result in devastating economic impacts like gas shortages is a bit dramatic. That regulations will cause mass unemployment, that the world won't be able to figure out how to make computers without fossil fuels is insulting to humanity. There's no doubt that fossil fuels gave us progress and we are where we are today because of them. But, I've said this before, but the whale blubber lobby is absolutely disappointed in the destruction of fishermen jobs. So we will move on. Regarding some of the proposals, there's a 90K bond to close old wells. I think we should increase that to 180 and adjust it for inflation. I don't think there are any penalties for accidents. I think there should be penalties for accidents. We can argue that they're not necessary, but if the industry is confident in their safety record, then they shouldn't mind having penalties set for any accidents. I don't understand these complaints about how regulations are burdensome when we, in the same breath, say that Colorado has some of the strictest regulations, and we're also one of the largest oil and gas states, but yet more regulations will just destroy the industry and set us back to a third world. I don't understand. Fossil fuels are a dead end. We cannot expand the use of fossil fuels if you care at all about your future generations. These jobs will be replaced. Solar panels do not install themselves. Wind turbines do not move themselves. There will be new jobs created. Like I said, we moved here from Texas 6 years ago. If you want to see deregulation, look at what happened in Texas when the power grid went out. That was the industry regulating itself. Someone mentioned before that there is a job transition program from the coal industry. We need to apply that to oil and gas as well. I think that's the right way to do the workers in this industry a favor instead of trying to deregulate it. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you, sir. Tim Gosar, you're now free to speak. Tim? Tim, can you unmute yourself? All right, we'll come back to Tim in just a minute. Peter Cunningham, you're allowed to speak.
Hi.
Oops, sorry, I just muted you. I'm sorry. Peter, you're allowed to speak again. Sorry.
I'm a 60-year resident of Colorado, Larimer County in Fort Collins. And I have children in the oil and gas industry. My daughter and her husband, my grandson and his fiance all work in the oil and gas industry. They have good jobs, jobs that allow them to own homes in one of the more expensive regions.
Sorry, Peter, I muted you again. I apologize.
Put shoes on their kids' feet and food on the table. Now, additional regulations, they may be a solution. They may be a problem. All I can say is the more difficult it becomes, the more expensive it becomes for all of us. Don't kid yourself. Regulations don't come free of charge. Jobs do come and go. These people cannot sit around and wait for work. They cannot sit around for months of moratoriums and months of permit lead time. It's expensive. It's expensive for companies and expensive for them. And at some point, it affects their quality of life. It affects our quality of life. So I'd encourage you to look at the regulations that you have. You've got more than enough. Let's leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Don't see that Tim is still on, so with that, unless there's somebody that hasn't spoke that wants to speak, got one. Judy Palmer, you're allowed to speak.
Thank you, Matt. My name is Julie Palmer. I am a Larimer County resident, and I served as a member of the Larimer County Task Force a few years ago. And I, along with several other task force members, volunteered months of our time to help develop reasonable regulations. We looked at a lot of different studies, and it's really disappointing to see that the new commissioners never gave those regulations a chance to work for Larimer County. I know that it's been disheartening for other task force members, and I've noticed that I haven't seen many of them participate in these meetings moving forward. And so it's just also sad that we haven't given the new COGCC regulations a chance to work, especially when we put so much work and so much time and effort into those. It's also been difficult to see Larimer County not consulting with the oil and gas industry in this regard, and not consulting with the actual landowners who own these mineral rights that are being developed in our county. You know, a lot of those landowners and private property right holders, they're not speaking out. I haven't heard them in these meetings. And so I just want to be a voice for the people who own those mineral rights. These are farmers, ranchers, widows and widowers, and people who rely on these production payments from these wells as part of their income. And I haven't seen a lot of consideration given to them through the process of this. And those are private property rights granted to them by the US and state constitutions. I'm also concerned about the tax implications that this de facto ban on oil and gas in Larimer County is going to have. Take, for example, in February, the shortage of natural gas. One of Fort Collins charter schools, their natural gas bill went from $1,200 in January to $12,500 in February during that cold snap. And that is an extreme drain on their budget, and they're having trouble figuring out how they're going to come up with that because we didn't have that reliable natural gas supply when we needed it. And further, I'm just concerned that Larimer County Treasurer hasn't been consulted about the financial effects of this de facto ban on oil and gas. Severance taxes, which are taxes on severing of the minerals from the earth, are paid in arrears. And with the decline of the industry in 2020, the effects of that tax base won't be recognized in Larimer County until 2022 or 2023. And this is going to have an effect on all our special taxing districts, such as schools, police, fire departments. And it's also going to affect the grants given by the Department of Local Affairs because their funding comes from 50% of the oil and gas production in this state. So I really hope that the Larimer County Commissioners would
would consider those as well as all the interests that they've been considering. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julie. Okay. That looks like it's it for everybody that wants to talk. Oh, here comes Ray Martinez. Ray, feel free to speak.
I hate to say this, but can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. We can hear you now.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. You've probably heard a lot of testimony and everything, and I just jumped in, so I didn't get to hear everybody. But I will say this: when you make these strong considerations about the oil and gas industry, you have to take into consideration the amount of impact that you're having, the domino effect that's having on the mom and pop shops, the small businesses, that's impacting people in Colorado all the way through the state, not only in the county, but the city. And remember, 80% of the businesses are small business people. So small business is big business in Colorado. So you're talking about having this huge impact when people are going to be shut down, possibly stores closing down, possibly because of that, or the amount of revenue it generates, which also has an impact on our sales tax revenue. As you well know, Colorado is sales tax dependent, and that makes a big difference on our economy overall. So I believe in clean industry. I believe in the safety of the industry, which I think those standards are in place. And I've seen this firsthand and my experience in being in city government for many years. I think that the safety concerns are there. So it's really important that we really weigh this carefully with balance. And I understand both sides of the issues very clearly. And I've listened to those both sides many times. So I ask you to be considerate of that and the impact that's going to have economically in Colorado. Colorado's already suffered enough through the pandemic with the economy. We don't need to take a bigger dip into the economy with that. So that's all I'll say for now. You know where I stand on it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Tim, looks like you made it back. You're free to talk.
Thank you for being waiting for me. I lost my internet connection, but this is Tim Gosar, a longtime resident of Larimer County. I want to thank staff and Matt Sura for all the work that's gone into the regulations. Every iteration is better and better, and I really appreciate the focus on health, safety, environment, and wildlife resources. I would start with my comments with the financial assurance section. I would hope that we could look at increasing the bonding requirements to 180,000 or more, given costs of reclamation and plugging in and abandoning wells. I'd like to see you think and entertain the idea of having operators submit sort of a cost analysis. So if a barrel of oil is $60, what does that do to their business? If it's 40, what does it do to that business? So you get some sort of an idea of what cushions they might have in their business model. And then I think if you reviewed everything, all the financial assurances annually, so there's a due diligence on everything that's submitted. So then the Larimer County residents aren't, stuck with a bill after the fact. I would hope that we be entertaining the penalties and fine section where there's increased fines for repeat non-compliance, and that there were big fines for serious damages. Serious damage is done, there should be big fines for that, and a section that lays that out. As far as the inspections, I would hope that we would be talking about inspecting with FLIR or OGI cameras so we get the best science and the best bang for our buck. I think that could be rolled into application fees and that be paid for by the operators. So we get that leak detection and repair information as quickly as possible and with the best science available. I think that again, reiterate that the application fee should cover the inspection program and inspections, and that should be covered by the operators. I think in the LDAR section, so the leak detection and repair, I think every year is just not sufficient. I think 30 days inspection, LDAR inspections are important to be able to fix leaks and problems. And I think that 48 hours to fix problems like other counties, I think is appropriate, not 72. I think that what we're really fighting for here, one of the battles is air quality, right? And I've lived in Larimer County for 25.5 years, and our air quality gets worse and worse and worse. And the biggest segment of that problem is the Well County oil and gas infrastructure and what's going on there oil and gas wise. And so we get an F grade in air quality because of that. And I think that's really an important thing that we really want to make sure that we focus on. And then I would say to all the commenters about a lack of regulation or too many regulations causes problems and is a job killer, I would remind them to think about the great financial crisis in 2007 and beyond. And what caused that was deregulation, right? Regulation, responsible, reasonable, appropriate regulations were rolled back. And that's why the inappropriate risk was taken. That's why the standards got totally thrown by the wayside. So really what this does is responsible, reasonable regulations are important and very important to keep sight of here. And I just want to thank you all for the time to speak and for the great work that's being done on the regulations. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for coming back. Okay, that's the last person on my list to speak. It looks like nobody else has signed up to talk. And if you haven't spoken yet and you want to speak, this is your last chance. If I don't see a hand come up, then we're going to take this opportunity just to thank you guys once again. This is our last public meeting before we go out, and we're going to spend some time in the next couple of weeks with our commissioners going over all the things that have been discussed in all these public meetings, and we really appreciate all the variety of comments. So the commissioners are going to have a lot to wrestle with, and hopefully you watch those meetings and listen in and be prepared for us to come out with a proposed draft, and then that proposed draft will be open for your public comment again before we go to public hearings on the matter. So thanks again. I think everybody here really appreciates all your comments from the county. And we do take this subject serious, and we hope to see you in the next couple of meetings. With that, I'll say good night.
Good night, everybody.